Dragonblood, Chapter 1. Cal needed to kill something. He needed to eat. He prowled the desert as if he were king of the sand, a far cry from the truth. His sweaty palm tightened on his hunting knife, his prized possession. Steps quiet, he neared the Sahana River. No animals, no tracks, no life. The dead bank glistened in the heat, taunting him. He glowered back. Cal followed the curves north to where a jumble of rocks crossed the river, making it more secluded than the open banks. Water splashed ahead. He crouched behind a boulder, stomach clenching in the hope that he'd found prey. His tongue rasped over chapped lips. Peeking through the slabs, Cal spied a girl digging for fiddlers. He swallowed his spit and ground his teeth. She would have scared any larger prey far away. Unhappy fingers twitched on his knife. The girl was young, maybe 9 or 10. She knelt in the languid water, twisting her hands into the riverbed. With a grunt of pain, she yanked her arm free. A palm-sized creature with a thorny shell and squiggly barbed legs clung to the flesh of her thumb. Teeth tight, she levered a knife between the shells and pried them open, revealing one bite of meat. Cal had zero skill at catching fiddlers. It took patience. Lots of patience. She tossed the prickly brown shell into the sand and held up a glossy mussel tinged pink with her blood. Instead of putting the morsel in her mouth as Cal would have done, she set the meat in a basket on the far riverbank. The insides of the wicker shone with the gleam of dozens of fiddlers. Cal stared. Saliva coated his tongue. There were enough for a real dinner, enough to satisfy the ache in his belly, enough to take some home to his ma. He swallowed. He needed to get across the river and within arm's reach of that basket. He jerked behind the rock, squelching the thought of stealing. Cal wasn't a thief. He focused on a black bug burrowing in the sand. All crunch and goo, no meat. Images of fiddlers sprang back to his mind. Stealing was wrong. And yet, his hunger was wrong, too. He craned his neck, peeking over the boulder. The girl yanked another fiddler from the earth. It dangled in her fingers, taunting him. He should join her in the hunt, dig for his own fiddlers. He'd managed to catch a few before. But tonight, the thought of doing the tedious work repulsed him. His whole body hummed with impatience. He rolled to the balls of his feet as hunger took control. He buried the tip of his hunting knife in the sand by his feet. His long tunic and leather sandals landed next to it. Wearing only his shorts, he stalked toward the water. Her back was to him, her focus on her work. He should turn around, leave her alone. Stealing was severely punished by the elders. He'd promised Ma he wouldn't get into more trouble. He told himself to stop, but the meal beckoned. Darkness rose in his breast, forcing him forward. As silent as a breeze, he waded across the slow water. His calloused palm shot forward and dug into the basket. Raw fiddlers squished in his grip. The girl turned, her eyes wide. He was 16, much bigger and stronger than she. She shrank back as her focus flicked from his full fist to his bare chest to his hard, set jaw. He told himself to give back her fiddlers, that this was wrong. But his body had come untethered from his mind. An invisible force seemed to control him as he brought the fiddlers to his mouth. But before the tenderness passed his lips, a rough palm gripped his shoulder and yanked him back. Cal whirled. Fiddlers flew and disappeared under the brown surface of the water. No! What do you think you're doing? The deep voice was hard. Rage replaced Cal's hunger as he stared at the ripples in the water. A good meal. Gone. Hands on hips, a large man glared down at Cal. I recognize you, Caledon Mirasan. It's not the first time you've broken the pact. Wait until the elders hear about you stealing from my daughter. Dread curled in Cal's belly. Not another tribunal. He refused to stand before the elders again and be told how he was a disgrace, how he was cursed. Apologize and promise restitution. That's what he needed to do. But the words wouldn't come. The violent force growing within him seemed to flex and crackle to life. Cal's fingers curled tight. I don't think even your ma can convince them you aren't cursed now. Cal swung for the man's nose, but he ducked as if he'd been expecting it. He threw out a punch, slamming his fist into Cal's stomach. Cal stumbled and fell, crashing into the river. The girl's scream pierced the water as her father's boot pinned Cal to the muddy bottom. Rocks sliced his back. Hot panic swirled through his chest as he fought the urge to inhale. He shifted left and the foot shoved harder. His back barked in pain. His lungs howled for breath, but his mind sharpened and calmed. Water distorted the fan's voice as he yelled down at Cal under the surface. "Are you done fighting?" Cal was just getting started. Gripping a small rock, he rammed it into a hairy calf. The water slowed the thrust, but he twisted it into the muscles. Red swirls inked the murk. The foot recoiled and Cal wrenched free. He plowed to the surface, panting and drifting. Cal spun to face his foe. He adjusted his grip on the stone and raked wet hair out of his eyes. Anger throbbed, commanding him to strike. "Stop!" the girl cried. Cal's nerves hummed in anticipation. Initiating violence, as he had done, was forbidden in Sikkim. For 16 years, he tried to keep his head down, eating porridge and mining the burning sand for precious little gold to live by. Cal had been a servant of the greater good, weak and obedient. Not anymore, said a voice in his mind. A menacing growl issued from his belly. The man swung, his fist aiming for Cal's face. Cal ducked. Following through with the rock, he smashed the man's elbow. The crack reverberated through Cal's wrist. The man staggered back. Blood dripped down his forearm, which dangled awkwardly at his side. The painful angle of the arm, perhaps the girl's symphony of screams, jarred Cal out of his one-track rage. The bloodthirsty filter fell from his eyes. He blinked, and the scene refocused. He saw the cowering girl and the bleeding man, a father protecting his daughter, one of the families from his village who'd suffered through the same searing Sikkim summers as he did. The urge that had driven him to cruelty abandoned him, leaving him hollow and ashamed. The rock slipped from his fingers and buried itself in the slow current. "I'm sorry." Even his voice had lost its strength. What had he done? He clambered up the rocks and snatched his belongings without pause. He ran north away from his village. When sand burned his feet and sun scorched the scratches on his back, he put on his tunic and sandals. He trudged through barren desert, failing to find any prey, his mind preoccupied with the failures of the day. He knew stealing was wrong, and attacking that man was worse. How could he face Ma and Grandpappy now, especially after he lashed out at them at dinner? Loneliness and shame twisted like a knife. Bile rose in his throat, but his stomach had nothing to expel. He returned to the river, abandoned of all but discarded fiddler shells. He stripped and slid under the water. Regret rolled over him. Scrubbing at his limbs, he tried to wash his wrongs away, but as he plodded home, they clung to him as painfully as his shirt stuck to the cuts on his back. Like a beacon far across the sand, the lights of Sikkim called. As the night settled in, the heat of the day lifted. A breeze ran cool fingers through his wet hair. Come summer, he wouldn't have any relief. He seemed to struggle with the festering heat more than others. He slunk around the north wall and entered the city gate near his 2-bedroom home. Hunger gnawed. If only he'd been a second faster and gotten the fiddlers into his mouth. He entered his small yard and locked the gate behind him, securing it against night predators. In front of the house, his ma and her father, Grandpappy, sat on rocking chairs in the sand. Unlit torches dotted the circular wall, protecting their home. The family hen clucked and pecked at Cal's toes. "Cal, you're home." Relief softened Ma's voice. Grandpappy scowled in disappointed silence. Cal knelt before Ma's chair, forcing his knees to bend and his head to bow. "I'm sorry about before. I'm sorry I said your dinner wasn't good enough. I'm sorry I spit on the table. I don't know what came over me." That was the truth, and Cal knew he'd better get control of his new impulses fast. People already thought him cursed. The curse of Prince Nogard, the Black Dragon, was a myth meant to scare people into suspicion. Despite the stories, naughty children did not grow into monsters. You'll have to get the book to read more, find out what happens with Cal.